a woman undergoes DNA purification aiming for career advancement, only to find herself drawn to a single man from her past lives. In 2044, artificial intelligence reigns supreme in employment, as humans are unfit for decision-making due to their emotions. To better compete with AI in the workforce, some humans choose to undergo the DNA purification process. The procedure involves exploring past lives to eliminate their emotional baggage and subconscious traumas. In Paris, Gabrielle feels unhappy with her job as a data core temperature reader job and aims to advance her career. In her past life in 2014, she was an aspiring actress in Los Angeles. Against the green backdrop, she is instructed to imagine herself inside a house to execute a horror scene. When the director cues her to start, she acts accompanied by a haunting score. In her performance, she nervously grabs a sharp weapon from the table and then screams upon seeing the Beast's shadow. Meanwhile, in 1910, Gabrielle was a pianist in Paris who was married to a businessman who owned a doll-making factory. At an exhibition party, she finds herself drawn to Louis, a young Englishman who reminds her that they dined together in Rome 3 years ago after the performance of Madame Butterfly. Gabrielle corrects him, saying they met in Naples 6 years ago. Despite this, Louis insists he remembers her clearly because she had said something he couldn't forget. Intrigued, the pianist asks what she said exactly. He reveals that she mentioned having a strong feeling that a tragedy, which she described as a beast, would destroy her. Louis adds that her anxiety about this prediction is why she avoided relationships before. However, Gabrielle clarifies that nothing happened, and she took the risk of getting married. As their conversation continues, the pianist asks Louis if he thinks she's insane for having such a premonition. However, he comforts her and understands her concern. The Englishman agrees to stay by her side despite her not recalling her fear, appreciating that she once entrusted him with it. Following this, the pianist reunites with her husband, Georges, but she finds herself looking at Louis. In 2044, Gabrielle runs into Louis after her career evaluation interview, unaware that they have a connection in their past lives. Upon learning that he's also there for an interview, she wishes him luck and heads to work. The following day, during another interview, she cites her human intelligence as a reason they should consider her for a better job. When the interviewer mentions that AI has progressed in this area, she angrily counters with statistics: 67% unemployment and 20% mechanical work. However, due to her outburst, the interviewer insists she's only suited for jobs where emotions can't affect results. To get better jobs, the interviewer suggests she clean her DNA by exploring her past lives, a proposal she'd previously rejected. She explains her fear of the consequences, such as losing her emotions. However, the interviewer points out that she will still be able to feel emotions, but only more serenely. Following this, Gabrielle de-stresses through dancing and speaking with a friend who doesn't regret undergoing the DNA purification. Her buddy encourages her to undergo the procedure to get her desired job. The next day, the interviewer successfully persuades Gabrielle to finally undergo the DNA purification procedure after explaining that it'll eliminate inherited traumas over centuries, thereby preventing them from impacting her subconscious. As part of the procedure, she's submerged in black liquid. Shortly after, a mechanical arm gives a painless jab in her ear. After closing her eyes, Gabrielle wakes up in the year 1910. There, she spends time with Louis, who's curious about the doll business that Gabrielle's husband had built after dreaming about it. She expresses her desire to have some when he asks about children. In contrast, he reveals that he considers himself a true loner. Continuing their conversation in a restaurant, Louis asks Gabrielle how she helps create the doll faces. She explains they use a neutral expression, which she demonstrates by mimicking it with her face. As they walk home, they discuss Gabrielle's music and the role of emotion in its creation. Shortly after, Louis asks to see her hand, curious whether a pianist's hand differs from others or if it's just their sensitivity. He then compliments her hands, calling them beautiful. However, after this, Gabrielle says goodbye. That night, Georges senses that Gabrielle is stressed and suggests they go on vacation. However, she implies that she doesn't want to. Just as he's about to tell her something important, she changes the topic and enters the piano room. There, she encounters a pigeon, causing her to hug her husband out of fear. The next evening, Gabrielle meets Louis to watch a play. During their conversation, Louis theorizes that perhaps the tragedy in her life has already occurred, suggesting it was marrying a dull man. However, she corrects him, stating that she genuinely loves her husband. Hearing this, he suggests he consult a clairvoyant to clarify her vision. Following the advice, Gabrielle visits the clairvoyant after the show. She shares her recurring premonition that something terrible will happen, even though it never does. Initiating the reading, the woman instructs her to close her eyes. The clairvoyant then speaks about an impending disaster, mentioning a beast poised to strike and interpreting a pigeon as a symbol of the Holy Spirit. She warns that while pigeons are generally positive omens, their entry into her house signifies impending demise for her or someone else. The clairvoyant also warns her about a man who can only make love in his dreams. She describes a problematic choice ahead, with a sense that it could destroy everything if not handled carefully. She also mentions a knife that Gabrielle will find on the table and a man in the next room. She advises her that she must leave because staying will be dangerous. After listening to the clairvoyant, the pianist opens her eyes and finds herself in bed. Following the woman's advice, Gabrielle gets the knife from the table and remembers the pigeon that entered their home the previous day, thinking of it as a bad omen. She also realizes that the man in the next room is George, prompting her to write a farewell letter to him. After the session, Gabrielle wakes up in the DNA purification room. In front of her, she encounters Kelly, an AI doll whose job is to ensure everything goes well. Following this, the doll accompanies her home, asking her how she feels. The woman responds that she is fine but dislikes being emotionless and dull like her. Unoffended, Kelly suggests using her features for some entertainment. When the doll proposes playing a game or make love, Gabrielle suggests they simply dance, prompting the doll to bring her to a club. There, Gabrielle encounters Louis. Now aware of their connection in a past life, she looks at him in awe but keeps it to herself. She lies and says no when he inquires if she underwent the purification process. In response, Louis admits he has doubts about the procedure, which prompts her to smile. In an attempt to trigger a memory, she tells him about Madame Butterfly and asks him to take her hand, which he compliments. However, he doesn't seem to recall her. After their conversation, Gabrielle returns to Kelly, who asks who she talked to. The woman answers this by saying she once left her husband for that man. In her follow-up interview the next day, Gabrielle is asked if she still feels as if something terrible will happen. In response, she confirms that the feeling has faded. To assess her progress, the interviewer shows her an image, causing tears to well up in her eyes. This reveals that deep down, she's still resisting something. The interviewer advises her to schedule another session in 2 days. At work, she confides in her friend Sophie, sharing that she's torn between the desire to continue living in the past and the fear of ruining the present. Sophie advises that letting go of her emotions might be best. In her next session, Gabrielle awakens in 1910 again, during the Great Flood. She visits the doll factory and Louis soon arrives. The assistant named Bertrand gives him a tour, showing him the production process. Following this, Gabrielle leads him to the display room where she imagines him hugging her. There, Louis asks if she can identify her fear now, but she admits struggling to articulate it. He then asks her which is stronger, her fear or her love for him. Instead of answering directly, she counters by asking if he believes she loves him. However, he simply requests to see her hand. As he holds it, she closes her eyes, overcome with emotion. Unbeknownst to them, floodwaters have entered the factory, causing a fire. Gabrielle then pulls her hand away, telling him that she can't love and doesn't want to love him. Just then, the light turns off, leading them to discover the fire. When they try to escape, the flames block their path to the main entrance. Left with no choice, they have to swim to get to another exit. Louis volunteers to go first, advising Gabrielle to follow if he doesn't return in 2 minutes. After he swims off, she dives in. Underwater, the pianist soon reaches the door but can't open it. Suddenly, she feels Louis' lifeless head beneath her foot, and moments later, she also drowns to her demise, revealing the tragic outcome of her choice to leave her husband. Following this, Gabrielle awakens in her past life in 2014, staying at a mansion she's house-sitting in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Louis, now an incel, records himself for his vlog. He explains how lonely and bitter he's become at 30 years old because no girl has slept with him. Later, he complains about couples ruining his view, ultimately leading him to devise a sinister plan. After a modeling audition, Gabrielle befriends Dakota, who suggests they hit the club after working on their side jobs. Before Dakota leaves, she gives Gabrielle an illicit substance, promising she'll see colors when she takes it. That night, Louis begins searching for his first target. When he parks by an empty lot, he spots Gabrielle and follows her home. Gabrielle greets the talking doll the following day before browsing the internet for cosmetic surgery options. When a fortune-telling pop-up ad appears, she clicks on it but quickly exits the webpage. She then calls the clinic but goes to the club that evening. There, she receives a text from Dakota who won't be able to make it. Gabrielle then takes an illicit substance and makes out with a stranger. Afterward, she tries to join a group of women but they reject her. Soon, she leaves the club and gets in the car, unaware Louis is following her. When she arrives at the house, she speaks with her mom on her laptop. Suddenly, the fortune-telling pop-up appears again. This time, Gabrielle decides to click the Call Now button. Unbeknownst to her, Louis is smoking in her backyard. Soon, the fortune teller answers and senses that Gabrielle is getting away from a man. However, the woman denies this, explaining that she didn't contact her to learn about her love life. Instead, she clarifies that she wants to know if she made the right decision to move to America. The fortune teller tells Gabrielle she's scared for her and mentions that the man she's speaking of only makes love in his dreams. Confused by these statements, the woman shuts down the laptop. Shortly after, Gabrielle hears a noise outside. Suddenly, she receives a call from the homeowner, informing her that the neighbor reported someone snooping around. She promises to look around. As she explores the rooms, she spots a pigeon inside the house, making her uneasy. To relax, Gabrielle heads to the living room and turns on the television, where she sees a man singing Evergreen. Just then, an earthquake occurs, prompting Gabrielle to evacuate and join the neighbors. Suddenly, she feels drawn to a man, prompting her to introduce herself as Gabrielle. When she asks if he can walk her home, Louis refuses, fearing he might do something stupid. Despite this, she pleads, not wanting to be alone after the disaster. However, he remains firm and declines. Gabrielle returns to the house shortly followed by Louis. When she sees him at the door, she invites him in for a drink, unaware that he has a gun behind him. He apologizes for his earlier refusal, explaining that he was afraid. Gabrielle encourages him to try to explain his fears, assuring him he can trust her. In response, he mentions the earthquake as an example. She comforts him, expressing understanding of his anxiety. She then commends him for having the courage to come inside. Gabrielle leans in and kisses him, leading to a romantic moment. As she experiences this, she feels elated while soaked in the black liquid. However, soon after, the woman freaks out when she realizes she's been with another man all along, revealing that she was fantasizing about Louis. She pushes him away but quickly apologizes. The man excuses himself and leaves the house, passing by the incel which is parked in front of the gate. Inside his car, Louis films himself sharing about the earthquake earlier, expressing that he wished it had lasted longer. He mentions a woman invited him to her house but he had to refuse. Louis admits feeling regretful because he acknowledges the woman moved him. However, he reminds himself not to give in, believing she's similar to other women who rejected him. Inside the house, Gabrielle receives a call from the homeowner inquiring about the house's condition, prompting her to lie that the Chinese vase broke. He asks about a man who entered the house, and she clarified that he was a friend. After the call, she intentionally breaks the Chinese vase and turns up the volume on the television, where she hears another cover of the song Evergreen, which brings her to tears. She wakes up again in 2044 crying. The voice informs her that Kelly is absent that day because she's undergoing tests. Following her session, Gabrielle walks home while talking to her purified friend, Sophie, sharing she had no idea why she cried upon hearing Evergreen. When Gabrielle asks Sophie's location, the woman reveals being at home because her cat is sick and having trouble breathing. However, the truth is she's strangling her cat, revealing how unemotional she's become after the purification process. Gabrielle then heads to the club hoping to meet Louis again. She asks the bartender about his whereabouts, but the bartender doesn't provide any information. Disappointed, she orders a drink and attempts to join a group of girls, but they still reject her. In her final session, Gabrielle wakes up in 2014. She spaces out while getting her makeup done, reminiscing about her imagined intimate moment with Louis. Afterward, she enters the green screen room and meets the director, who guides her through the scene. He asks if she can portray being fearful of things she can't see, and the actress assures him she'll do her best. After filming the scene where she falls to her demise, she goes to the club to dance. Unbeknownst to her, the sinister Louis is watching her from a distance. When she leaves, Louis follows her once more. Before entering the house, she visits a neighbor to ask about Louis, but he doesn't recall him. On her way to the house, she accidentally steps on a lifeless pigeon, prompting her to wash her foot in the swimming pool. Growing curious about Louis, she uses her laptop to search for him, which leads her to his social media page. After sending him a friend request, she searches for her name and stumbles upon images and videos that are not of her. Then, she searches for the song Evergreen, but finds an unrelated video instead of the music she was looking for. Looking for answers, she returns to the fortune-telling website but encounters numerous pop-up ads. Just then, her doll starts talking, and the house alarm blares, prompting her to turn it off. Terrified, she calls out, asking if anyone else is in the house, but she doesn't hear a response. The security company calls and asks if there's an intruder, but she clarifies that there is none. Upon using her laptop, Gabrielle discovers that someone's trying to send a file. She accepts it and watches a video of Louis parked in front of the house in broad daylight, outlining his vengeful plan to become intimate with with a lifeless woman. She replays the clip and hears him say that he only makes love in his dreams, leading her to realize that the fortune teller was referring to him. Gabrielle contacts the fortune teller again to seek clarification, but the woman says those matters are personal. She suggests they talk again when Gabrielle is alone, sensing a presence behind her. When Gabrielle glances behind her, she notices the pigeon inside the house, a bad omen. As fear consumes her, she cautiously steps backward and retrieves the knife from the table, mirroring a scene she did in the green screen room. She suddenly sees a bee's shadow, prompting her to scream and hurry to the surveillance room. On the monitors, she spots an armed Louis entering the house, searching for her. Soon, he attempts to open the surveillance room. She screams once more, but he remains firm that he can't back down. Gabrielle tries to comfort him, assuring him that he can still change. When she mentions she is about to open it, he suddenly advises against it. Still, she unlocks the door and approaches him slowly, but the moment repeatedly rewinds to when she's about to open the door, as if giving her a chance to change her mind. However, she still ends up opening the door. As she tries to kiss Louis, her vision suddenly blurs. She finds herself bloodied and drowned in the pool after Louis shoots her, an outcome of her choosing not to leave. During another evaluation, Gabrielle breaks down in tears upon seeing the image of her demise, revealing that the DNA purification process ultimately didn't work on her. The interviewer apologizes, citing their failure rate of 0.7% and acknowledging that she is part of it. Later, Kelly comforts her, recounting a dream where Gabrielle was dancing with a man at a club, symbolizing a timeless love enduring through the years, an evergreen love. When Gabrielle asks what happens after that, the doll only says nothing. Suddenly, Kelly kisses her, but she interrupts, begging her to connect him with Louis. Hoping to finally pursue their always interrupted love, she sends him a voice message. Assuming he also realized their connection in their past lives, she invites him to meet her at the club to tell him something important. That night, Gabrielle finds Louis at the venue. He confesses that he listened to Madame Butterfly after their initial encounter and found it magnificent. In response, she admits she was glad to see him. When he asks what she'll tell him, she struggles to find a starting point. He then suggests starting from the end. Just then, she invites him to dance as the song Evergreen plays. While in each other's arms, Louis admits that he recognized it was the same song they listened to, a discovery he made during his purification process. Upon learning this, Gabrielle slowly backs away, realizing Louis undergone and succeeded in his DNA purification procedure. In tears, she finally confesses her love for him. Though he reciprocates verbally, it's without emotion. Realizing this, she breaks down, devastated that she and Louis are not meant to be together even in her current life.